the Hyundai Veloster N. This week I've finally gotten a chance to do some street driving in this car. All I've done in this up until now is track drives. I've gone out to California City, driven this at the Hyundai Proving Grounds. I've driven this on Road America. And, first world problems, but it's kind of difficult to get an idea of what a car is like on the street, on the track. So I've lived with this thing for about 300 miles this week. Really spent a lot of time in it, gotten to know some of its nuances and what it's like to live with, what this thing is like to use on a daily basis. So in this video, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Veloster N. This is one of my favorite new cars on sale these days, and there's a lot to go over. So, as keeping with tradition, Hyundai added the two doors on one side, the coupe-like single door on the driver's side. Kind of a funky arrangement. Personally, I prefer four-door hatchbacks because you have that practicality of being able to use the rear door for storage and easy access. But in this, you have a really nice trunk to serve the same purpose. It's a really deep and low opening down here. You can put a lot of stuff in here. There is even a little bit of a storage compartment down below. No spare tire, unfortunately. Saves weight. But you do have a flat kit and some other things in there. All this comes apart really easily. You can fold the back seats down, get even more cargo space. Really high quality feeling little latch there to lift things up. Feels very German, feels very BMW Porsche. The back seats, let's unlock it first. The back seats are usable, but they're not, this isn't the Elantra, so to speak. This roof line makes things a little bit tough to get in and out of. Really have to duck your head. But once you're back here, and I could probably move my passenger seat up a little bit more. Driver's seat set to my position, and there's quite a bit of legroom there. Headroom seems ample for me at 5'10". And it's an attractive interior in here. It looks really nice. Lots of black and blues. Yeah, this is definitely a usable back seat. You're not going to be wanting to throw 6-foot tall adults back there all the time, but in a pinch, it'll work. So, 275 horsepower. This has the performance pack. It's painted in the right color. It's got the big brakes, the 19-inch wheels. This is how you need your Veloster N. I would highly consider the performance pack if you're looking at one of these cars. It's worth the extra $2,500 or whatever it is. It's just makes the car so much more aggressive and so much more fun to drive. So let's get into it here. My favorite thing about this car and what makes it so fun to drive and live with are the drive modes and how easily they're selectable. So, right off the bat, let's give it a little bit blip. Here it is in just normal drive mode. Exhausts, the exhaust valve is closed. Get a little burble, a little exhaust note there, but it's pretty muted, pretty toned down. Put it into N mode. It's loud. It does the pops and bangs, and they're kind of natural sounding pops and bangs too. It's pretty cool. It's almost like an anti-lag system. So we're going to get into that a little bit later, but basically you have 3 drive modes. On this side you have normal, sport, and eco. And those are pretty descriptive as to what they are. And then you have your N mode, which is like the BMW M button back in the day, or now still. That's N mode, one press just sets everything to full stiff, full aggressiveness, full loud. You've got all sorts of settings in here that adjusts. You can see G meters, torque, things like that. If you press it again, it puts you into N custom, and that's what I've been driving this car most in. So you can see it's got your engine in Sport Plus, your rev matching in Sport Plus, your limited slip differential, Sport Plus, exhaust, same thing. And then your chassis control, I dial that back a little bit for the street. Softens up the suspension, makes it more livable. In Sport Plus, the suspension is very, very stiff. It's great for the track though. So it's nice to be able to adjust that and dial it back and kind of give this car multiple personalities. My ESC, we even put that in sport. We can do off too, but for the street, we're not even going to be getting close to the limits of this car. Also, you know, this being a Veloster, you've got the 3 windows here. I will say, driving around, cruising, fun fact, the air flows really well through this car with this 3-window setup. There's not a lot of buffeting. You get to hear that exhaust a little bit more. Kind of a cool fact. Let's see here. What else? We've got a great shifter. Okay, so this 6-speed, it's short, it's notchy, it requires just a little bit more effort. I'm not a huge fan of the ball, honestly. I'd like a narrower shifter, but minor gripe and kind of a personal thing. It has a real handbrake, none of this electronic handbrake nonsense. And the rest of this is just standard Hyundai switchgear. You know, you got a decent amount of space. You got some scratchy plastics here and there, but really, your 30 grand, or even less than 30 grand in this car, is going towards one of the best front-wheel drive cars I think ever made. This is a phenomenal vehicle. It's incredible the things that it can do at speed. All right, let's take this for a drive and see if we can get the front window to stop fogging up. So right now we're in custom and custom mode, so we've got a little bit more of an aggressive exhaust. The reason I've been driving in this a lot is just it sounds good. It sounds proper. It sounds like a proper hot hatch. You've got the rev matching, which works incredibly well, but if you put it into normal and you turn that off, you can still heel toe very easily. You can downshift very easily, and it's quite good to drive organically as a natural shifting experience. However, the rev matching works so well on this car, and it's so fluid and natural that it really does add to the driving experience, and I think it makes it a pretty nice feature. I wasn't a fan of rev matching when it first came out, but now that I've used it in some of these vehicles, it's really kind of growing on me. So the purist in me says match your own revs, do your own heel toe downshifts, but a lot of drivers that's just not something that they do, and this is a helpful feature in lieu of that. I love the way this thing sounds. This actually sounds good. This is a proper throaty 4-cylinder turbo sound. You'll hear it once we get into the higher revs. You can have some fun with this thing. It doesn't sound as loud in here too, but from the outside, those pops and bangs are so loud. They hurt your ears, they're so loud, which is kind of fun. Alright guys, little series of turns here. From a dynamic standpoint, I am so impressed with how this thing rockets out of corners. It absolutely shoots. The front limited slip differential in this, the end carving differential, does magical things. For a four-wheel drive car, it almost has the traction of an all-wheel drive car out of corners from a dig. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. So the way that it distributes power, senses what grip is there, I mean, this is as good as it gets for front-wheel drive. And then Hyundai's tuned the suspension so that there really isn't a lot of torque steer. The really skinny sidewalls from the 19-inch wheels help with that also. But the way this thing drives, handles, performs at the limit is phenomenal. If you really want to see this car getting pushed, check out my videos on the TheTopher and Winding Road of this car being tested at the California City Hyundai Proving Grounds. We really drove the hell out of these things all day long. The brakes held up, everything held up. They were just champions. It was awesome. So, which kind of gets me to thinking that we're pretty lucky in the United States to get this Veloster N as opposed to the Elantra N. And from people that I've talked to who've driven both, apparently the Elantra N's a little bit softer, a little bit more think Elantra GT N line, but plus a little bit. Not quite as aggressive, not quite as hardcore. This is a pretty aggressive hatchback. It's maybe a little bit less of a hatchback in my mind than a front-wheel drive performance sport coupe. You have the aerodynamics, you have the chassis stiffness that's just a little bit more pronounced, a little bit more aggressive than your standard hatchback. The grip levels, the way it puts its power down and performs is just... Look at that turn in and corner exit. Usually that's an understeer situation in most front-wheel drive cars, not on the Veloster N. It's super neutral. You can induce lift-off oversteer in these cars if you really try hard and you turn all the stability control things off, but ultimately the stability control works to help you get around the corners more, and the car feels a little bit faster for it when you're at the limit. So anyway, we're on the street. Enough about limit handling. Let's talk a little bit about what this thing is like to live with. So in normal mode on the highway, the exhaust is silent. There's no drone, there's no sound. You put it into N and you get a little bit of drone, a little bit of noise back there. You can kind of tune it according to your own levels of tolerance or your passengers' levels of tolerance, and it's a switch of a button. It's so easy to change these cars' drive modes. The suspension. This is one of my big questions on this car when driving it on the street. Is the suspension livable? I'm going to say yes. It is not. It's not soft. It's not like a Toyota Camry, but it's very livable and comfortable. It does a good job smoothing out most bumps. Larger bumps, larger road imperfections and undulations, it's a little firm over, but for most stuff, driving around normally, it feels just like a little bit of a stiffer Veloster turbo. So I could definitely daily drive this, no problem. It's not Focus RS stiff. It's not first gen Fiesta ST suspension stiff. It's quite a good tuned setup, and there's a reason why they went with the electronically adjustable dampers in this car, is so that it could have that dual personality and still have such high capabilities on the track. So Hyundai really did their work in suspension tuning in this car, and it pays off. It probably doesn't ride as well as the Civic Type R, but it's not bad, and I wouldn't shy away from daily driving this at all. It's firm, but not punishing. Let's call it that. One of my complaints is this turning radius isn't very good. You start to notice that in parking lots. Luckily, though, the steering rack is so quick, only about 2 turns lock to lock, that that kind of helps make up for it. But you'll find yourself doing some Austin Powers turns here and there if you really need to get around a tight situation in the city. Alright, let's put it back into N mode here. Oh man. This car. It's just fun. It's a little bit of a hoon. It's a little bit of a nuisance. There's a rebellious nature to this thing that I've grown to really like. God, the cornering, the grip, it is nuts. You put it into N mode, full on, you get even more traction. Now I will say at full stiff, this car it's firm. It's very firm. You feel it. You feel every little bump, every little road imperfection. But it makes the car very neutral, very agile, changes direction incredibly quickly. But it's not necessarily something you want for the street. That's why you have all this adjustability. It's great. You can make the car exactly what you want. So what else? Fuel economy. Been getting great fuel economy until I started filming videos this week. We have hypermiling. I was probably getting about 32 on the readout. After a full tank of gas and driving this thing like a hooligan, I'm averaging about 24 miles to the gallon. So not too bad. This doesn't even take premium, so you're really not going to be spending that much at the pump. Yeah, gas mileage, no complaints. I think you do just fine. You save a little bit of money in this car compared to a lot of the other high-performance turbo cars on the market. It doesn't take premium like the GTI, doesn't take premium like the Civic Type R. There's a pretty significant difference there these days. Also, I mean, all right, getting back to the sound, I think the only other front-wheel drive car that sounds this good is the Fiat 500 Abarth. And I used to argue that's the most fun car in a parking structure. And this might be pretty close. Let's go to a parking structure. Let's test this out. And hit another entrance ramp while we're at it. Anyway, guys, I honestly can't stress enough how serious of a performance car this Veloster N is. I got into this and I thought it was just going to be a little bit more of like a massaged over Veloster turbo, but it's a whole different beast. It's a whole different game. You'll really be pressed hard to push this thing to its limits on the street. It's a really good track car. This is something that you can take out and enjoy all day long at the racetrack. It's pretty amazing that they've built that capability into this in stock form. I think ultimately when you're comparing this to its competitors, it's a really, really compelling purchase. Unless if you have strong preferences in one direction like the GTI or the Civic Type R, the value on this is almost unbeatable. You get awesome Hyundai ergonomics, really good usability and features. Everything works well, everything falls to hand nicely. It's a very livable package too. I would probably, maybe this is sacrilegious, but I would probably spec it in like a more stealth color, like a black or something. This does get a little bit of attention. And I would really say the only knock against the Veloster N is the aftermarket for it probably isn't going to be huge. I know Hyundai's working on some performance parts for these cars, for their N-line cars. Who knows what they will be? Who knows when they'll be coming out? Probably soon, though. And I'm sure some companies will pick up on how great of a car this is and start to develop some performance parts for it. But it doesn't have nearly the aftermarket support that a lot of its competitors do. And that's always been a little bit of a downfall for the Veloster. But I would argue that this is pretty perfect out of the box. It doesn't really need a whole lot. Brakes, you're golden. Get some more aggressive pads. Get some more aggressive rotors on here. Call it a day. Throw some stainless steel lines. Improve your brake feel just a little bit. But as it is, it's a bomb-ass front-wheel drive hot hatch. This thing rocks. I mean, what else is it need? You've got the exhaust covered. It sounds amazing. Makes all the right noises. The only thing I might do is if I bought one of these, I would buy slightly smaller wheels and tires, just so that I had a little bit more sidewall protection for going over bumps. I think you'd end up with a tad bit more torque steer as a result, but it'd be worth the trade-off just for that extra added protection. All right, parking structure time. Will we set off any car alarms? Oh, you guys, this thing sounds so good. It's Dream Cruise week, so we've got a lot of muscle out here. That's a fun noise. Yeah, I think this succeeds as a parking structure hero. We'll give it that. Oh! I don't know how clearly that came through the headphones, but that was freaking loud. Okay, well, I think that's going to wrap up my thoughts on the Veloster N. Really great car. If you want one, I don't know if they're even doing test drives these days. Might be a little hard to get into, but hopefully you've gotten an idea of what it's like to drive and live with through this video. So not a lot of negatives, a lot of positives. It's a little bit of a, I think it's a little bit of a younger car. I think this would have been like a perfect car for me in my mid-20s. Now, I already have like my perfect garage, so I'm pretty set, honestly, but this is a very high consideration on my list if I wanted like a performance track car or daily driver or something that could just do it all. This would be very high up there. And it's like $6,000 cheaper than the Type R with marginally less performance, just very, very slight. With driver mod, I think you'd probably balance it out a little bit on track. All right, guys. Well, the Veloster N leaves tomorrow. It will be missed. I'm sure we'll get some more time in them at the Mama rallies this fall. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Stay tuned to the Winding Road videos on this coming up. We're also going to do a night drive tonight. It's going to rain. We'll get some wet handling in this thing. Should be a good time. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.